An army of 100,000 soldiers laid siege to the city. The defending soldiers, upon seeing this spectacle, couldn't believe their eyes and quickly alerted the city's defenders. No sooner had he left the city wall than catapults began hurling flaming projectiles at the city. This was the year 1291, and the city was Acre, the last stronghold of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The defenders were the renowned Knights Templar, and the attacking force was the Mamluks. The two sides were vastly mismatched, with a few hundred defenders facing off against 100,000 attackers. Before the battle, the Grand Master of the Knights, Godfrey, encouraged all the knights to fight to the death. They were not only fighting for Acre but also for the Holy Grail. After the war council, the knights, clad in armor and helmets, took their positions at the second city wall. Mamluks were scaling the walls, and the first line of defense had already been breached by catapults. The knights formed ranks, raised their lances, and charged at the enemy with all their might. They carved a bloody path through the enemy ranks before retreating and charging again. Behind you! With their superior equipment and combat skills, the Templars fought valiantly, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. Like ants swarming the city, under the cover of catapult fire, Mamluks continued to pour into the city. The Templars, outnumbered, saw their banners fall and chaos ensue. Grand Master Godfrey ordered Landry to retreat with the Holy Grail. Landry wanted to stay and fight, but Godfrey insisted that protecting the Grail was their top priority. Acre was lost, or perhaps it was doomed from the start. Landry and a few knights opened a stone sarcophagus and retrieved the Holy Grail. However, the Mamluks had already reached the docks, their rapid advance suggesting a traitor in their midst. But there was no time to worry about that at the moment. After packing the Holy Grail and the gold, everyone headed towards the dock. Landry was supposed to ensure the Grail's safety, but he heard a girl's cry for help. He ordered his men to take the Grail to the ship while he went back to rescue civilians trapped under debris. After fending off several enemies, Landry saved a father and daughter. The Templars, adhering to their code of never leaving a man behind, disembarked to support Landry. The Red Cross sails were hoisted and the ship sailed out of the dock, while Landry was still fighting on the shore. At this moment, he was completely unaware that a crossbow was aimed at him. Knight Gawain saw the danger and shielded Landry, taking an arrow to the knee. Though not fatal, the injury would leave Gawain permanently disabled given the medical standards of the time. With his comrades' cover, Landry boarded another ship. Everyone looked back at the city of Acre. At this time, the buildings in the city were collapsing and the people in the city were being captured. The Grand Master blamed himself for the city's fall, but Landry vowed to one day retake the Holy City. Just then, a catapult projectile struck the ship carrying the Holy Grail, sinking it. Acre was lost, and the Grail was at the bottom of the sea. The knights could only watch in despair as their symbol of faith disappeared. 15 years later, the surviving Templars were stationed in Paris. Landry had become close with King Philip of France, teaching him swordsmanship. At this time, the two began to compete in swordsmanship again. King Philip had outstanding looks and was called a handsome man. Although he has an outstanding appearance, his swordsmanship is very ordinary, and Landry soon knocks his sword away. The two seem to be fighting, but in fact they are talking about the issue of loyalty. Because although the Templars had a branch in Paris, this unit was not under the command of the King of France, they were completely under the command of the Pope. The swordsmanship competition was eventually interrupted by William de Nogaret, the King of France's trusted minister. King Philip was forced to attend to state affairs, but he was in a foul mood. De Nogaret didn't trust the Templars' loyalty to France, as they answered only to the Pope. With the French treasury depleted and the Templars unwilling to help, de Nogaret suggested targeting the wealthy Jews. Everyone knew that the Jews were rich, but the king also knew that they would not lend him money. Obviously, de Nogaret was not talking about lending, but robbing. King Philip, seeking his people's love, rejected the idea. The Knights Templar all took a vow of abstinence, which was their discipline, but Landry's eyes were attracted by a woman. The knights are holding a meeting, and the content of the meeting is all about the issue of lending funds. Landry didn't care about all this. As a soldier, he wanted to do something meaningful, such as improving the social status of Jews in Paris. But the knights have a rule that no matter where they are, they cannot interfere in local affairs, which makes Landry very depressed. After the meeting, the Grand Master sought out Landry to talk. However, Landry brought up Acre, expressing his long-standing desire to return and retake the city. He didn't understand how long they had to wait after 15 years. When the team leader was explaining the situation to him, he suddenly saw an orange, and the conversation ended there. The Grand Master appointed Landry as the temporary leader and then hurriedly left the city. Not long after departing, he encountered bandits. The Grand Master charged through the encirclement on horseback, but the bandits pursued with crossbows. Soon, the Grand Master's horse was struck, and he found himself surrounded by the bandits. These were no ordinary bandits. Their leader knew the Grand Master's name, Godfrey. As swords were drawn, Godfrey found himself surrounded and struggling to fend off the attackers. When Godfrey was about to be attacked, a man saved him. He had no weapon, so he could only use a stick to fight against the bandits' axe. When the axe fell, Godfrey killed the bandit with one sword. Godfrey is badly wounded, so he lets the horse bandit leader go. With his final breath, Godfrey instructed the man to deliver his sword to Landry, a Templar knight in Paris. The man's name is Parciful. He's an honest farmer, and he has a beautiful fiancée named Marie. Marie doesn't want him to get involved in any of this. She just wants to live her life in peace. But Parciful doesn't listen to Marie and chooses to ride to Paris instead. Landry climbed into a window and met a woman named Joan. This woman was the one who had attracted his attention before. Now that he saw her, he couldn't take his eyes off her. There's a big deal going on in the city of Paris. A man who had been humiliating Jews for years died at a lecture, and in plain sight, his killers carried a yellow circle logo on their clothes, the very symbol of the Jews. Ethnic tensions in the city reached a boiling point. Parciful arrived at the Templar headquarters and informed Landry of the Grand Master's death. Landry dispatched knights to retrieve the body. At this time, another murder case involving Jews was reported to Landry. King Philip prayed for this matter in the magnificent cathedral, and Minister de Nogaret proposed to send all the Jews out of the city. He said that this would calm the anger of the people in the city, otherwise, the city would be in chaos. King Philip finally agreed to this solution. De Nogaret was not so kind. He wanted the money of the Jews and asked them to withdraw from Paris just to kill them all on the way. The Jews who killed people in the square before were also hired by him. This was all his plan. Joan overheard this plot and informed Landry. As the Jews left Paris, they were ambushed in the woods by mercenaries. They were holding weapons and shields, and a massacre was about to take place. At this time, the knights came roaring, and the mercenaries on the opposite side were frightened and retreated straight away. These mercenaries were no match for the knights. A girl with a stick also fought back bravely. The mercenaries saw that the situation was hopeless and fled. The knights won. Landry thanked the girl for her bravery. The girl's father said that it was Landry who saved them in Acre before, and now Landry has saved them again. Landry arranged a place for the group of people. Meanwhile, the knights sent to retrieve the Grand Master's body found Parciful's fiancée Marie murdered by the bandits. It was the escaped bandits who came back to take revenge on Parciful, and a once happy family was torn apart. A junior officer in the Knights Templar discovered a sapphire in the hilt of Captain Godfrey's sword. He looked through the light and found the Holy Grail pattern, and inside it was an iris, the national flower of France. This indicated that the Holy Grail was in France. King Philip was furious when he learned of de Nogaret's plot and warned him that another transgression would result in his execution. After warning de Nogaret, King Philip and the Queen walked into the meeting room. Queen Joan was the woman who was with Landry before. Parciful lost his beloved fiancée. He couldn't sit idly by. Every second of waiting was agony for him. He opened a door and saw nothing but gruesomely dead bodies inside. Just then, a bandit appeared behind Parciful. The bandit told Parciful that he no longer needed to seek revenge, as he would soon be reunited with his wife. At that critical moment, the Holy Knight Landry knocked the bandit unconscious from behind. They learned from the bandit that Godfrey's body was downstairs, but the bandit claimed not to know why they had dug up the body. Their leader was named Roland, who used a crossbow as his weapon. Marie had died from a crossbow bolt. Upon hearing this, Parciful was enraged and punched the man unconscious. It turns out that before this, the paladin was going to bring back Godfrey's body, but when everyone arrived, they found that Godfrey's body was gone. Therefore, everyone began to look for the whereabouts of Godfrey's body. Landry felt helpless with Parciful's impulsiveness, as they could no longer question the bandit about Roland's whereabouts, but they now knew the location of Godfrey's body. Landry came to the bottom of another building and saw several people dissecting a body. Mutilating a corpse was a grave disrespect. Suddenly, someone inside the building mentioned that Roland was upstairs. Hearing this, Parciful immediately went to find Roland, revealing Landry's position in the process. With no choice, Landry had to engage in combat. He quickly dispatched 2 opponents, but there were still many enemies inside. The bandits began to taunt Landry, saying that his uniform hadn't seen blood in 15 years, while they, as outlaws, fought almost every day. They implied that the Templar Knights lacked combat experience. However, they didn't know that Landry was formidable. A group of bandits fought Landry to a standstill, with neither side gaining the upper hand. Upstairs, Roland was having an old priest write a letter for him, as he was illiterate. The letter stated that he had obtained the body of the knight commander and would send the item over after handling it. After the priest finished reading the letter, Roland killed him, as he was no longer useful. At that moment, an enraged Parciful rushed to the 2nd floor, just as Roland emerged from a room behind him. As Parciful lunged at Roland, a bandit restrained him from behind. Roland ordered Parciful's execution and then left.
Parciful, isn't it?
Parciful struggled with the bandit and eventually overpowered him. Just as Landry was fighting alone, Gane arrived with the Holy Knights. Gawain's knee was injured, causing their formation to be easily disrupted, and he was overwhelmed. His injured leg couldn't support his body, making his sword swings weak. Once the strongest swordsman, he couldn't even defeat a single bandit. Landry had to step in and save him. Gane was frustrated and threw his shield to the ground. When Landry reached the upstairs, he found Parciful sitting alone and helpless in a corner, with a bandit's body lying nearby. Meanwhile, the city of Paris was bustling. Pope Boniface had arrived, and all the Christians in the city lined the streets to welcome him. He had come to Paris for 2 reasons: to preside over the farewell ceremony for Godfrey's body and to secretly search for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail was of great significance to them. If they found it, the Templar Knights would receive a blessing, like a divine decree, helping the Crusaders to conquer the Holy City. Therefore, they greatly valued the Holy Grail. After Landry was appointed as the commander of the Paris branch of the Templar Knights, they found a key in Godfrey's body, but it didn't open any box. King Philip's daughter, Isabella, was now 12 years old and of marriageable age. 2 princes had come to propose: Prince Louis of Catalonia and Prince Edward of England. The princess favored Prince Louis because they had been exchanging letters. Isabella was moved by Louis's sweet words and gentleness and was determined to marry him. However, King Philip was troubled because England was more powerful. If his daughter married Prince Edward, it would ensure long-lasting peace between England and France. From all perspectives, it seemed best for the princess to marry Prince Edward, but Isabella was unwilling. King Philip was at a loss, and Nogaret also favored the English prince. However, Queen Joan hoped her daughter would marry the Catalonian prince, because the queen married King Philip at the age of 12, and has always regretted not marrying for love since their marriage. Now she doesn't want her daughter to repeat her mistakes. Unable to make a decision, King Philip turned to Pope Boniface, who had arrived in Paris. The queen thought this was a good idea, but Nogaret was unhappy. Knowing the Pope would choose Catalonia, an alliance between France and Catalonia would strengthen the Pope's influence across the continent, while England was an island across the sea. Nogaret decided to stop the Pope and planned to send an assassin to kill him. The assassin thought the mission was dangerous, but Nogaret offered him a lakeside villa and a monthly stipend for a year. Satisfied with the generous reward, the assassin agreed. He took advantage of the opportunity when the Pope met with believers on the street and mixed into the crowd with a dagger. The Pope was completely unaware at the moment and was still praying for the believers. In the palace, King Philip and his courtiers awaited the Pope's arrival. but he was unusually late. The queen suggested sending someone to look for him, and Nogaret was secretly pleased, thinking his plan had succeeded. However, the next moment, the doors opened, and Pope Boniface entered. Nogaret's assassination attempt had failed. The Pope conveyed God's will that Isabella would marry Prince Louis of Catalonia. An envoy presented gifts, and Nogaret received one as well. When he opened the box, he found the head of the assassin he had sent. The new commander, Landry, hoped Parciful would join the Knights. Parciful, now alone, would benefit from the support of the Knights. Landry told him to think about it and then went to see his old friend Gane. As the commander, Landry wanted Gane to step back from the front lines because his injured leg made him unfit for battle. Landry explained that if Gane continued to fight, he would not only burden himself but also his comrades. Landry suggested he train new recruits instead. However, Gane didn't want to train new recruits. Once the best swordsman in the Knights, his injured leg was a result of saving Landry. Gane felt he was being treated unfairly and even regretted not letting Landry die on the docks of Acre. Landry was hurt by Gawain's words but knew he had to make tough decisions as the commander. Allowing Gawain to continue fighting would be irresponsible. Frustrated, Gawain went to a tavern. According to the rules, Templar Knights were not allowed to drink in public. Just then, Nogaret sat down next to Gane and offered to find the best doctor to treat his leg in exchange for a favor. He revealed the Pope's true purpose in coming to Paris. Gane didn't respond directly but raised his glass.
What do you know about the Holy Grail?
The castle where the Knights Templar are currently located belongs to the de Cox family. They found their way here using the key that Godfrey had hidden in his stomach. The old physician of the Knights Templar discovered that the key was not meant to open a box but was instead to be installed on a gemstone. Everyone saw the gem shining through the light, reflecting the de Cox family emblem. At the castle of de Cox, Landry learned a secret. Godfrey was the owner of the castle, Marcel de Cox. For many years, Godfrey had been protecting the Holy Grail, ensuring it did not fall into the wrong hands. An old man who appeared to be a steward recounted Godfrey's story from before he joined the Knights Templar to two knights. Back then, Godfrey was not the brave and loyal man people spoke of. He once stabbed his own brother Raymond with a sword because of his desire for power. Although Raymond did not die, he was left disabled. However, Raymond forgave his brother's actions, which filled Marcel de Cox with guilt. He then decided to join the Knights Templar and changed his name to Godfrey. Later, Godfrey found the Holy Grail and used it to serve wine to his brother. Miraculously, after drinking the wine, Raymond was able to stand up. Landry and Tancred couldn't believe what the old man said. They felt it was as unbelievable as a fairy tale. To prove his story, the old man removed his clothes, revealing a scar that ran through his chest and back. It turned out that this old man was Raymond de Cox, Godfrey's elder brother. The two showed expressions of disbelief, but the person involved was standing right in front of them. Raymond turned around and took out a scroll, which was the clue about the Holy Grail left by Godfrey. Just as Raymond was about to hand them a scroll containing clues about the Holy Grail left by Godfrey, he was stabbed, and the scroll was stolen. Tancred quickly chased after the black-clad figure, while Landry stayed behind to check on Raymond. The man in black, who had already escaped, was now checking the scroll. At the same time, Tancred chased after him, and then the two of them fought fiercely for a scroll. The man in black had already read the contents of the scroll and he planned to destroy it. Tancred attacked him, and during their struggle, the scroll fell to the ground. The scroll fell to the ground, and the knight was about to pick it up, but the man in black was more agile. The knight who got the scroll was about to turn around and leave, but was controlled by the whip in the black man's hand. The scroll was fought over between the two men. Tancred was very anxious. The man in black saw that he was no match for the knight and threw the scroll into the fireplace. Just as he tried to retreat, Tancred picked up his longsword and stabbed his opponent through the body. Tancred rushed to the fireplace, but the scroll had already been mostly burned. On the other side, Landry was also attacked by a man in black. The man in black threw concealed weapons not far away, but none of them hit Landry. Obviously, the other party did not want to kill him. Landry gave chase, but the figure disappeared. Just then there was a voice.
Grail is not yours to find.
Landry thought the voice was familiar, but looked around and couldn't see anyone. Voices echoed in the empty room, and all he could do was use agitation, calling the man hiding in the shadows a coward, trying to force the other man out. Just then, Tancred suddenly appeared. The shout diverted Landry's attention, and his opponent took the opportunity to cross over Landry and escape down the sewer pipe. Landry felt that their mission had been in vain since the scroll was destroyed. However, Tancred pointed out that the black-clad man was still alive and knew the contents of the scroll. In the end, they captured a barely alive heretic. At this time, there is also a new development on the royal side. As King Philip's queen Joan is pregnant, feeling something abnormal in her body, she hurriedly arranged for the imperial physician to examine her body. The royal doctor examined her and determined that she was pregnant. The royal doctor was very happy and felt that there was a new member of the royal family. But the queen was full of worry, and she instructed the royal physician not to tell anyone about it, especially the king. Thinking that the queen wanted to surprise the king, the royal physician agreed to it. Only the queen herself knows that she hasn't shared a bed with King Philip for 2 years. If the king found out about her pregnancy, the consequences would be dire. In the beginning, when she just spoke a few more words with a piano player, King Philip chopped off all the fingers of the piano player, so she couldn't let the king know about it. The queen ordered her maid to find some abortifacient drugs. The maid had found medicine, but the side effects were so great that even if she survived, she would most likely go blind. Desperate, the queen decided to keep the drugs just in case. Nogaret, King Philip's trusted minister, did not believe in Christianity because his parents had died in a religious incident, burned alive. He did not want Princess Isabella to marry into Catalonia, as it would strengthen the Pope's influence. Nogaret met with the English envoy and proposed his plan. King Philip had sent a horse to the English prince, which was Princess Isabella's favorite. However, the English envoy stated that he was there to discuss the marriage proposal and threaten war if the princess did not marry Prince Edward. This was all part of Nogaret's plan to force the princess into marriage through the threat of war. King Philip, falling for the ruse, ordered Nogaret to seek military aid from Catalonia. However, the Catalonian envoy refused, stating that Catalonian soldiers would not fight for France. This was all part of Nogaret's scheme. But an unexpected event occurred. A man stepped forward from the crowd and, with just a few words, infuriated Nogaret, who threatened to cut out the man's tongue. Yet the man smiles and formally introduces himself to everyone. It turns out that his true identity is Prince Louis of Catalonia, who has been disguising himself all along. The crowd was surprised, and then this prince took it upon himself to say that he would send reinforcements. Nogaret watches as everything that happens in front of him goes out of his control, and there is no way to break off the princess's marriage. The king was very happy about this and even held a banquet. However, this banquet was mainly to celebrate Landry's promotion to the Grand Master of the Order of Paris. During the banquet, the king asked Landry to help mend his broken marriage with the queen. Landry and the queen danced and talked, with Landry expressing his intention to end their secret relationship to focus on finding the Holy Grail and managing the Knights Templar. The queen wanted to tell Landry about her pregnancy but didn't get the chance. Joan was in so much pain that she went back to her room and drank the potion in one desperate gulp. At this time, in another room, Princess Isabella was very happy because she was with Prince Louis. Nogaret hurried into a secret passage and skillfully removed a wooden plug. On the other side of the wall was Princess Isabella's room. At the same time, the captured Saracen from the de Cock's castle was revived by the Templar physician. He spoke of prophecies and the world falling into darkness. Tancred questioned him about the scroll and the Holy Grail, but the Saracen refused to answer. Gawain prepared to torture him, but the Saracen began speaking in English, predicting the destruction of the Knights Templar and the burning of Paris and the temple. He also foretold Gawain's death by fire. Landry returned to the temple and asked Tancred about the Saracen. Tancred reported that the Saracen had been rambling about the Holy Grail destroying the world and would only speak to Landry. Landry pushed open the door of the ward with doubt, but saw a cold corpse.
What happened here?
In France, there was an old man who was the last resident pagan in the area. When he saw the Knights Templar, he couldn't help but show his surprise, as there was significant conflict between the two factions, even to the point of bloody confrontations. Landry found the old man to ask for help. Landry then drew an 8-pointed star on the ground, containing a crescent moon, and asked the old man if he knew its meaning. Seeing the symbol, the old man said he had never seen it before. The reason Landry was asking was that he had seen this symbol on the wrist of a murdered Saracen, which stirred memories from his childhood. However, he couldn't remember who the person associated with the symbol was, so he sought Jonas's help. Jonas was a doctor. He first threw a handful of powder into the fire and began preparations. He cut his palm with a dagger and then stained a wooden snake figurine red with his blood. After completing this ritual, he gave Landry a drop of an unknown liquid, and Landry instantly entered his memories. In his memories, Landry saw his mother sending him to a monastery, and he also saw Godfrey. At that young age, Landry desperately wanted to be Godfrey's squire and follow him to Jerusalem, but Godfrey did not agree and told him to enjoy being a child. Soon after, there was a knock at the monastery door. Outside stood a man named Malraux, who claimed to be from Toulouse and was asking about Godfrey's whereabouts. Landry quickly informed Godfrey about this. However, Godfrey was not surprised. The next morning, Malraux appeared and brutally cut off the arm of the abbess. Godfrey knew that Malraux was a misguided Cathar assassin. The Cathars were originally a peaceful sect, but Malraux had used this identity to become a killer. However, these are not the main points. The main point is to find the Holy Grail. Malraux, thinking Landry was Godfrey's son, used him as a hostage. In his panic, Landry revealed that the box was in a tree, and Malraux cut the rope to retrieve it. As he was reaching for the box, Godfrey stopped Malraux. Landry took the opportunity to grab the box and run, but Godfrey was injured by Malraux's falcon gauntlet and fell. Landry ran as fast as he could, but being just a child, he soon ran out of strength and hid behind a large rock. He peeked out but saw no sign of Malraux. Suddenly, Malraux appeared beside him.
Get up, boy! Whoa.
Just as Malraux was about to kill Landry, an arrow struck him in the back. Godfrey had come to the rescue. Malraux tried to sow discord, saying that Godfrey had only returned for the Holy Grail in the box. Godfrey revealed that the box contained only sand and that the Holy Grail had already been taken away. With that, Landry became Godfrey's squire and followed him eastward. In the desert, they encountered a man with an 8-pointed star branded on his wrist. The man held an orange and muttered something. In reality, Landry kept repeating this phrase. When Landry wakes up, Jonas tells him that the phrase means he who discovers his own self discovers God. According to legend, this sect has appeared since the 14th century and is a general term for various Christian mystical sects that claim to have received revelations from God. Jonas told Landry that stories about this organization were widespread along the Silk Road. He said these people were not ruled by anyone, and no one knew where they came from. They acted mysteriously, killed many, and then disappeared without a trace, often using an orange to gather their followers. Back at the Templar headquarters, Landry hung an orange from the battlements to attract these people. Before leaving, Landry had also given Gane a task, which was now complete. After a series of interrogations, Gane identified a trainee knight as a major suspect, tied him up, and whipped him with a whip to interrogate him. However, the man refused to confess. Tancred couldn't bear to watch it and stopped the flogging. The man then looked at Tancred and suddenly confessed to killing the Saracen. This was all part of Gawain's plan. When Tancred intervened, Gane knew he was the real culprit. Tancred calmly admitted his guilt, believing that the Holy Grail would bring disaster because many had already died for it. He chose to kill to prevent the Grail from being found. He also spoke some profound words.
Look at the pain the Grail has already caused. Godfrey's death, and all the bloodshed since. If God wanted men to possess the Grail, he wouldn't keep taking it from us.
Tancred was eventually jailed. Queen Joan, after taking the medicine, found that she felt no discomfort and was slightly relieved. Her maid, however, showed no surprise and was too calm. The Queen of Catalonia came to France and mentioned the Kingdom of Navarre as soon as they met, which made Queen Joan feel very uncomfortable. Although she was the rightful ruler of Navarre, she had never been there. Seeing this, de Nogaret began to plot. He told the Catalan envoy about Isabella and Prince Louis's affair. The news quickly reached the Queen of Catalonia.
Luis, prepare yourself, we are leaving.
What is wrong, Your Grace? Has something happened?
Nothing from you, strumpet.
Mother!
Who had been looking for an excuse not to lend troops to France. She claimed that Isabella's behavior was unbecoming of a princess and that such a princess was not worthy of Catalonia. King Philip was furious when he heard this and agreed to the Queen's demand to publicly verify Isabella's virginity to dispel the rumors. Isabella was terrified. Knowing what she had done, Queen Joan encouraged her daughter to face the situation bravely. Isabella lay in bed, feeling deeply humiliated that a princess of France had to undergo such an examination. She began to resent Prince Louis, believing he must have spread the rumor since only the two of them knew the truth. She even started to regret her decision to marry him. After the examination, the results showed that Princess Isabella was still pure. In fact, Queen Joan bribed the person in charge of the examination, but she seemed to have noticed that the Queen was pregnant, so she tactfully advised the Queen to take care of her health. The Queen was shocked when she learned this. She went back and did a test herself and found that she was still pregnant. Her maid had switched the medicine, fearing the queen would regret her decision, as her sister had gone blind from a similar drug and regretted it every day. That being the case, the queen decided to make the best of a mistake, and now there was another way to make this child King Philip's child. She went to King Philip's chamber and undressed. Meanwhile, outside the palace, Isabella's favorite white horse lies dead and miserable on a blue cloth printed with the French crest. Originally a gift from King Philip to the Prince of England, the horse has been returned in such a way that it seems to signal that something big is about to happen. King Philip, the King of France, dressed in armor and wearing his crown, conveyed his decision to the French soldiers. Across the Channel, England had instigated this war. The French, even if it meant shedding their last drop of blood, would fight England to the end and never surrender. No one could conquer France. He then raised his sword, and the soldiers cheered and waved their flags. De Nogaret, watching the excited King Philip, still did not want to go to war with England and decided to meet with the English envoy. Landry was hanging oranges on the city gate waiting, but he didn't see anyone show up after waiting for a long time. At that moment, Gane arrived at the city wall and stated that it was time to execute Tancred. His punishment would be to carry a cross on his shoulders and walk past his fellow knights. Along the way, the knights would strike him with their fists to expel the supposed evil spirits within him. The heavier the blows, the more Tancred would be saved. The heavy cross made it difficult for Tancred to walk. At first, he could endure it, but soon he couldn't hold out any longer. Even when beaten to his knees, he felt no regret. Tancred believed that killing the Saracen was to protect the Holy Land.
I do not repent.
De Nogaret arrived at the Earl of England's residence, only to find it empty. King Philip was bewildered and displeased that the English had left without a word. To make King Philip aware of the danger he was in, De Nogaret brought the Pope to persuade the king not to go to war with England. De Nogaret took a sip of red wine and suddenly felt something strange in his body. His vision blurred, but he did not collapse. He rushed to Queen Joan and, with his last bit of strength, knocked over the wine she was about to drink. The wine was poisoned, and chaos ensued as everyone suspected the English of the deed. At this time, Landry was waiting on the tower for the church members to appear, but what he waited for was the news that the royal family was assassinated. He rushed there with his man. Landry was more concerned about the queen's safety than the overall situation at the palace. He learned that De Nogaret was unconscious, and since the type of poison was unknown, there was no way to treat him. Everyone thought De Nogaret might not survive. Despite the incident, Princess Isabella's wedding was to proceed as planned, and Landry was tasked with protecting the queen. Gane inspected the Earl of England's room and detected a strange smell coming from a box.
What is it?
It contained Greek fire, a highly flammable substance that could be ignited by the smallest spark and could not be extinguished with water. Gane knew that only one person was familiar with Greek fire, Tancred. Tancred initially refused to speak, but when Parciful mentioned the presence of 2 boxes of Greek fire that could burn down the palace and the temple, Tancred revealed what he knew. He had seen a Mongolian killer using Greek fire, but he didn't know his name because this mysterious man always wore a mask and came and went without a trace. Tancred suggested using sulfur to detect the Greek fire, as it would turn white upon contact with the substance. Landry visited the queen's chamber for the first time, feeling unhappy because he knew the king and queen had reconciled. He was heartbroken that the woman he loved did not belong to him. Queen Joan revealed that she was pregnant and had to stay with the king. Landry was shocked but happy to learn that Joan was carrying his child. Just when he was happy, the queen said that the father of the child could only be King Philip. The queen also said to Landry again what Landry had said to herself before. At this time, Gane came knocking on the door and reported to Landry about the Greek fire. After a thorough inspection using sulfur, the palace was deemed safe. As the knights left, a mysterious iron-faced man appeared. They found the knight's physician and said that if Landry wanted to talk to him, he must first return the Saracen's body to him. It turns out that the Saracen who was captured before was his son. After hearing what the doctor said, Landry immediately agreed to the other party's conditions. The wedding proceeded as planned, but not everyone was happy. Parsiful thought of his fiancée, Marie, and Landry, standing beside the queen, noticed a shadow. An iron-faced man was aiming at the king. Landry pushed the king out of the way and was struck by an arrow. Chaos erupted. and Princess Isabella fled with Prince Louis, but she was captured by a black-clad figure. Prince Louis quickly chased the robbers, but the robbers took the princess into the carriage. The carriage was not moving fast in the alley, and the prince finally caught up with the horse. Isabella's skirt got stuck in the carriage, and the prince took out a dagger to cut off the skirt. But Isabella suddenly pushed the prince down and jumped out of the carriage herself. The prince was still calling out the princess' name in worry when the Iron Mask drew out his scimitar and the carriage burst into flames. No one could survive under such flames. The princess pretended to be in pain on the side of the road. Back at the palace, Princess Isabella gave Nogaret an antidote, and he regained consciousness. It turned out that Nogaret had orchestrated the entire plot to sabotage the wedding. No one expected that the only person who was poisoned was the mastermind behind all this. The missing English ambassador did not return to England, but was kidnapped by the man in the Iron Mask. The Iron Mask took off his mask, revealing a yellow-skinned woman. Everything she did was instructed by Nogaret. Facing the English envoy, he said that he would tell King Philip that all this was the Duke's conspiracy. The reason was that he was resentful of not being able to marry the princess and wanted to sabotage the marriage. All this had nothing to do with the Kingdom of England. The marriage between France and Catalonia could no longer continue. The prince died, and the queen returned home with his body. Nogaret again proposed a marriage alliance with England, and this time, King Philip agreed. Landry, feeling dejected, walked alone through the streets, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about his child calling the king father in the future, and he had blocked an arrow for the king. At this moment, someone suddenly called him. A group of men in black appeared in the darkness, and a man walked out of the crowd. Landry recognized him. It was the man in his memory, Rashid. This man, who had committed countless evil deeds and taken many lives, was unexpectedly outmaneuvered by a seemingly insignificant character. A woman followed a suspicious man to a dye house. The man was highly alert and had already noticed someone tailing him. However, he remained composed because, in his eyes, the girl was also his prey. The girl, fearless, bravely engaged in a struggle with the man. During the fight, the girl quickly picked up the broken pieces of the pottery jar and stabbed the man, but unfortunately she failed. The man, growing impatient, drew his dagger. Just then, the girl suddenly smiled. She explained that she had heard the signal for the guards to change shifts. Seizing the moment of his distraction, the girl embraced the man and rolled out of the window with him. The man fainted when he landed. The girl quickly informed the guards that this man was Roland, wanted by the Knights Templar for several murders. The guards, upon hearing this, took both of them to the Templar headquarters. Upon seeing Roland, Parciful was filled with rage. Gane stopped him and told Parciful that he was now a trainee Templar and must remain calm at all times. The Templars had captured Roland, but Landry was nowhere to be found. Upon learning this, Gane immediately ordered all Templar knights to search for Landry. Draper, however, stated that they would not find him, revealing that Landry had been taken by the Brotherhood of Light. A short while later, Landry returned to the Templar headquarters, shackled and limping. When he breaks the chain, Gane tells him that Godfrey's killer has been caught. Enraged, Landry rushed to the dungeon, not to interrogate Roland but to vent his anger. If not for Gane and Draper's intervention, Roland might have lost his life. After venting his fury, Landry visited Tancred in his cell. Seeing the miserable Tancred, Landry asked him to pack up and then took his equipment to find the blacksmith. Gane then announced that Tancred had been expelled from the Knights Templar. Tancred took his armor to the blacksmith's shop. His equipment will be melted down into chains, and he will be paraded in chains for 1 year and 1 day. Before Gane could finish speaking, Landry interrupted him. Landry said that this punishment was a penance that would only be accepted by brothers who were allowed to return to the order, and Tancred was exiled and would not be allowed to return for life. Tancred remained silent, but he could sense from Landry's expression that something serious had happened. After expelling Tancred, Landry fell into deep thought. Earlier, he had been captured by the Brotherhood of Light and locked in a wooden crate, his hands and feet shackled. As he tried to escape, water began to fill the crate, quickly submerging it. Landry tried every means to break free, but to no avail. Just as he was about to give up, the water level began to recede, and then he heard knives hacking at the wood. It turned out that Rashid had orchestrated this to instill fear in Landry and extract the information he wanted. Rashid demanded to know Landry's mother's name, but Landry refused to answer. Rashid then set fire to the wooden crate. Although the wet wood did not catch fire, it produced a thick, choking smoke. Rashid continued to press Landry for his mother's name, leading Landry to suspect that the scroll contained this question. This lack of a positive answer from him angered Rashid, and he had his men add some fuel to the fire. Although the wooden box did not catch fire, the temperature rose rapidly, and it was hot and choking. Landry was so uncomfortable that he kept stamping his feet. Rashid then devised another torture. He made Landry stand on a stone with a rope around his neck, making it difficult for him to breathe and causing him to hallucinate. In his delirium, Landry mistook Rashid for Queen Joan. No matter how much Rashid interrogated him, Landry refused to answer. Rashid was about to kill him but was stopped by his men, who reminded him that killing Landry would mean losing the information they sought. Landry had been hanging like this for a long time. His body could no longer support him. His hallucinations became more and more clear. It seemed that his life was about to come to an end. Just as he seemed on the brink of death, Rashid's henchman Khalil slapped him awake. Khalil killed 2 guards and escaped with Landry to the outskirts of the city. During their escape, Khalil revealed to Landry that the scroll did not ask for his mother's name but for his birthplace. Rashid had lied. Landry, lying on the ground, struggled to understand why Godfrey, a Christian, would be involved with the Brotherhood of Light. Khalil explained that the Brotherhood of Light was composed of people from various nations who shared a common goal: to protect the Holy Grail from falling into the wrong hands. As Khalil spoke, he mentioned Landry's childhood involvement in protecting the Holy Grail and casually asked how old Landry was at the time. Landry sensed something amiss and suspected that Khalil was trying to extract information under the guise of saving him. So, he started shouting Rashid's name. Sure enough, it was Rashid's ploy, but unfortunately Landry didn't fall for it. Rashid loses his patience and regrets that he didn't kill Landry in Acre City 15 years ago, and after that, he pulls out his scimitar. Outside the French royal palace, the royal family and de Nogaret watched as the attendants of the English envoy were led to the gallows. The Earl of Oxford had committed suicide, and his attendants were accused of treason, but this incident had brought England and France closer together. Isabella saw the servant going to the gallows with tears in her eyes, and she was very emotional. Meanwhile, King Philip was about to bestow a title upon de Nogaret in recognition of his loyalty during the royal crisis. As the attendants were hanged one by one, the princess fled the execution scene. The queen went over to comfort the princess, while de Nogaret spied on her from the other side. Isabella wanted to say that she indirectly killed the 2 British servants, but she didn't confess the truth in the end. She said that she was sad because of Prince Louis's death. Relieved, de Nogaret returned to his room, where he found a man waiting for him. The man, hidden in the shadows, was de Nogaret's uncle, Malraux. The two were plotting to bring down the Knights Templar and the Pope. Malraux revealed that he had assembled 2,000 elite soldiers, but de Nogaret wanted 5,000. Malraux said that he needed 5,000 elite soldiers, which would require more money. Malraux then mentioned de Nogaret's father. He said that de Nogaret's father was burned alive by the Pope's men. Malraux reminded de Nogaret not to forget the revenge for his father's murder. At the royal palace, King Philip held a ceremony to knight de Nogaret. Isabella was overjoyed and promised de Nogaret a surprise after the ceremony. The princess came to de Nogaret's room and tried to flatten the scroll, but accidentally knocked over the pen holder. As she picked up the pens, she felt a draft, indicating a hidden door. Intrigued, Isabella opened the secret passage and explored it. At a bend in the passage, she saw her mother through a peephole. Further along, she discovered another small hole blocked by a wooden plug. When she removed the plug, her expression changed to one of shock. She realized that the hole looked directly into her own bedchamber. Suddenly, she remembered the night she had spent with Prince Louis and understood that it was not Louis who had betrayed her but de Nogaret. Furious, Isabella confronted de Nogaret in front of the assembled guests and courtiers, accusing him of murdering Prince Louis. After hearing this, King Philip asked everyone to leave. The princess confessed that she believed de Nogaret's words because she thought it was Louis who revealed that they were together. King Philip was shocked to learn that his daughter had been intimate with Prince Louis. De Nogaret tried to argue that the English envoy had poisoned him. Isabella directly exposed the truth, saying that it was de Nogaret who asked her to give him the antidote. Cornered, de Nogaret admitted his actions, claiming he had done it all for France. De Nogaret said that King Philip chose Catalonia to please the queen. Enraged, King Philip attacked de Nogaret. Meanwhile, Rashid held a knife to Landry's throat but did not kill him, knowing that another group was also searching for the Holy Grail. Rashid agreed to let Landry find the Holy Grail, but on the condition that Tancred, who killed his son, be handed over. So Landry chose to expel Tancred, but he couldn't let his brother die, so he decided to replace Tancred with himself. Gawain overheard Landry's struggle and questioned why he would protect a traitor. However, Landry's mind was made up. Adelina, who had captured Roland, was preparing to leave. Parciful gave her a bag of money, explaining that it was a reward from the Templars for capturing a fugitive. Before leaving, Adelina handed Parciful a small note, saying it was a message Roland had intended to pass on and that it might be useful to them. Landry went to face Rashid alone, taking responsibility for the Templars' actions as their leader. Landry said he would rather not have the Holy Grail than exchange the life of the paladin for information. After saying that, he drew out his sword and threw it on the ground. Disappointed, Rashid ordered his men to kill Landry. Just then came Tancred's voice. It was Gawain who brought him. Tancred offered to exchange himself for the information about the Holy Grail. Rashid whispered to Landry that he should look for the Grail in the place where he and Godfrey had first met. He also promised that the Brotherhood of Light would follow Landry if he found the Grail. Nogaret was sent to the gallows shortly after he was knighted. The king publicly declared that Nogaret was guilty of treason and murder. According to the law, Nogaret had the right to speak his last words. Nogaret vehemently defended himself, insisting that everything he did was for the sake of the nation. Although he admitted to killing, he denied any act of treason. The king, however, saw this as mere excuses. Since Nogaret could not prove his innocence, the execution had to proceed. Then the king signaled to the soldiers, and Nogaret was sent to the gallows. With the noose tightening around his neck, the soldiers pulled up the rope, and Nogaret's breathing became increasingly difficult. Just then, the unexpected happened. Nogaret's uncle, Malraux, had prepared in advance. After dealing with the executioner soldiers, he fled with Nogaret. King Philip could only watch from a distance, angrily shouting Nogaret's name. Meanwhile, Landry, accompanied by Gawain, was searching for the Holy Grail. Following a clue, they learned that the Grail might be at the monastery where Landry first met Godfrey. However, upon their arrival, they found the monastery reduced to ruins. An old woman at the scene explained that a child playing with fire had caused the building to burn down. Landry was filled with self-blame. He was tortured for this clue and implicated Tancred, but the result was a wasteland. At that moment, Landry felt utterly hopeless and decided to give up the search for the Grail. Gawain returned to the streets to distribute bread to the poor. Among those who came to receive it was a beggar dressed in coarse cloth. It was Nogaret. After escaping the gallows, he had not left Paris. He hoped to obtain information about the Holy Grail from Gawain. Now, Nogaret too had joined the quest for the Grail. Gawain informed Nogaret that Landry had abandoned the search for the Grail. However, Nogaret did not believe him. Landry sought an audience with the Pope, confessing his interactions with the Brotherhood of Light and the exchange of Tancred for information about the Grail. The Pope consoled Landry, advising him to take his time in the search. Landry also mentioned that the Brotherhood of Light was protecting the Grail. Upon hearing this, the Pope became displeased and emphasized that the Grail belonged to Christians alone, and heretics should never lay hands on it. The Pope then expressed relief that Landry had not found the Grail and warned him against further contact with the Brotherhood. Landry tried to explain, but the Pope, unwilling to listen further, dismissed him. Queen Joan's pregnancy became increasingly evident, forcing her to inform King Philip. Although Landry was unhappy that his child would recognize another man as his father, he could do nothing about it. The king mentioned that the royal physician had said the queen was carrying a prince and even had Landry touch the queen's belly, which made Landry feel even worse. At that moment, the king received news that Catalonia had invaded Navarre. The queen, upon hearing this, became restless, as Navarre was her territory. The king stated that it would take 2 weeks to gather the troops, but the queen could not wait. She wanted to leave for Navarre immediately to save her people. The two argued, and the king even ordered the guards to escort the queen back to her chambers to calm down. However, the queen would not sit idly by. That night, she left for Navarre with her maidservant. At a meeting of the Knights Templar, Landry learned that the queen had defied the king's orders and gone to Navarre alone. This news consumed his attention, causing him to overlook another piece of information. Roland was the murderer of Godfrey. Roland was to be extradited to Genoa for trial, as he had also committed murder there. Landry rushed to the palace to help the king bring the queen back. but the king refused. He assured Landry that arrangements had been made in Navarre to ensure the queen's safety. King Philip, who was disobeyed by the queen, wanted to leave the palace incognito and have a drink to relax. He changed into commoner's clothes and insisted that Landry accompany him to drink freely. As a Templar knight, Landry was forbidden to drink in public, and as the commander, he especially could not break the rules. But the king asked him to drink, and he couldn't refuse, so he had to drink it all in one gulp. After drinking, King Philip confided in Landry, complaining that the queen called him a coward and said he had never been to battle, unlike the Templar knights who fought on the front lines. Just as they were talking, the king was bumped into by a passerby. Landry tried to calm the king down, but the king, wanting to prove his manhood, challenged the man to a fight. A fistfight ensued in the tavern, with Landry coaching the king. This was the king's first time fighting as a commoner, and his opponent, unaware of his true identity, showed no mercy. As they were celebrating their victory, they were suddenly ambushed. Landry fought back against the attackers. On the way back to the palace, the king complained to Landry about Nogaret's betrayal, which had deeply hurt him. He felt that the most painful thing was being betrayed by someone he trusted. And now he believed that only Landry was a true friend. Landry, however, did not respond. In the Templar dungeon, Parciful was torturing Roland to find out who was behind the plot. Draper intervened and mentioned that Roland was to be sent to Genoa for trial. Parciful questioned this decision, believing that nothing was more serious than the murder of the Templar commander and that Roland must have accomplices. He showed Draper a note with the message, "I am in Paris, need more people." Draper, however, was unconcerned and only wanted to close the case quickly, accusing Parciful of seeking personal revenge. Unable to convince Draper, Parciful decided to take matters into his own hands. He retrieved a necklace left by his fiancée and, the next day, disguised himself as a carriage driver from Genoa to take Roland to a secluded forest. Roland, upon seeing Parciful remove his helmet, was not surprised, as if he knew his fate was sealed. Landry made a mistake and told Gawain that he had an affair with a married woman and that she was pregnant with his child. However, he did not expect that Gawain would tell Nogaret about it. Nogaret was not surprised to hear the news, but tried to sow discord between Landry and Gawain. He said that even if Landry found the Holy Grail, he would not use it to heal Gawain's leg injury. Gawain didn't believe it at first, thinking that he became like this because of Landry, and Landry would definitely help him. However, Landry confirmed Nogaret's words, stating that the Grail was not meant for healing Gawain and that enduring pain was God's will. Gawain was speechless and could only pray alone before the cross. He could not understand why Landry, who had broken so many rules, was still considered righteous, while he, despite his devotion, had to endure physical suffering. Suddenly, he decided to seize the Grail, believing it to be God's will. In the forest by the river, Parciful tied Roland to a tree. He kissed the ring left by his fiancée and threw it into the lake. Parciful interrogated Roland about who had sent him, but Roland showed no fear. Parciful then struck Roland in the stomach with an axe, causing Roland to panic and mutter something. Parciful seemed to understand something after hearing this. He walked to the river, picked up the axe and walked towards Roland again. Roland kept praying, and Parciful smiled and told Roland that everything was over. The next day, led by the old woman, Landry and Gawain continued their search for the Grail. They arrived at a monastery where Landry met the abbot who had cared for him as a child. The abbot now had only one arm, the other having been cruelly severed by Malraux. The old woman opened a door, and Landry and Gawain entered a tunnel. After some effort, they discovered a tree with a box hanging from it. Landry took down the box and opened it, revealing the Grail inside. This small cup had caused countless deaths. Gawain confirmed it was the Grail and then drew a short sword from behind his back. Landry had been on guard but did not expect Gawain to act so quickly. Initially, when the old woman warned that Gawain would try to seize the Grail, Landry did not believe her. However, Gawain's actions now confirmed her words. Landry thought Gawain would wait until they returned to the city to make his move, but he underestimated Gawain's impatience. The two fought, with Landry attacking Gawain's weak points, tripping him and knocking him to the ground. Gawain, enraged, fought back. But Landry soon had his sword at Gawain's chest. Landry did not kill Gawain but instead knocked him unconscious. As Nogaret wandered the streets, he overheard people talking about France going to war. Upon inquiring, he learned it was not with England but because Catalonia had invaded Navarre, and even the pregnant queen had gone to Navarre. The passerby's words reminded de Nogaret of what Gawain said. He once said that Landry had a child with a married woman. At this moment, de Nogaret seemed to understand something. The old woman asked what had happened to Gawain, and Landry explained that he had knocked him out and would release him when he woke up. Landry intended to deliver the Grail to the Pope. The old woman strongly objected, insisting that giving the Grail to the Pope would mean certain death. Landry, however, did not believe her. The old woman then revealed that she was Landry's biological mother. Landry looked at her, knowing she spoke the truth, and was momentarily speechless. Parciful returned to the sanctuary and told Pierre about killing Roland and discovering the mastermind behind him. He then stated that he trusted no one and wanted to inform the commander immediately. At that moment, Pierre attacked him, and Parciful paid the price for his trust. The Knights Templar and the Papal Guard have engaged in a rare confrontation. The Templars, outnumbered, are forced to retreat first due to the Papal Guard's numerical advantage. The catalyst for this conflict is none other than the Holy Grail. After retrieving the Holy Grail, Landry is determined to hand it over to the Pope, as the Grail is a sacred artifact of Christianity. If the Pope regains the Grail, he could launch another crusade. Back at the sanctuary, Pierre came to report that Parciful had kidnapped the suspect Roland in disguise, and he also confessed that he knew about it but did not report it. In reality, Parciful has been killed by Pierre, and his body disposed of in Godfrey's sarcophagus. Fortunately, Parciful had previously contacted Draper of the Knights and mentioned Roland's letter for help. Although he didn't know who was behind Roland, he got a key piece of information, which was Roland's code name. Landry decides to send everyone to search for Parciful and the letter in the vast Saint Germain forest. Pierre, watching the knights leave, nods to someone in the crowd, indicating that everything is going according to plan. With the Holy Grail found, Rashid arrives, his mission also being to protect the Grail. Landry insists on giving the Grail to the Pope and is willing to face the consequences. Despite his mother's and Rashid's attempts to dissuade him, Landry trusts no one. The Pope arrives at the sanctuary with a large entourage, excited about the reappearance of the Holy Grail. Looking at the plain cup in Landry's hand, the Pope was impressed by its simplicity. Landry offers to escort the Pope and the Grail to Rome, but the Pope declines, stating he has enough protection. Landry inquires about the Pope's plans with the Grail, and the Pope reveals his intention to launch another crusade to reclaim Jerusalem. Landry hesitates, not wanting more bloodshed, but the Pope accuses him of being influenced by infidels. As the Pope's guards leave, Landry notices something amiss. He sees that the guards have numbered tags on their collars and recalls Draper mentioning 4. Realizing Roland is a papal guard, Landry deduces that the Pope is behind Godfrey's murder. Since all the knights had been sent out to look for Parciful, there was a serious shortage of people in the sanctuary. Landry confronts the Pope, revealing his knowledge of Roland's identity. The Pope admits to killing Godfrey for refusing to hand over the Grail to the Church. His true plan is to use the Grail to instigate wars in Europe and restore the Church's former glory and power. A fight ensues, but despite their numbers, the Papal Guards are no match for the Templars. Landry rushes to the gate to have Pierre close it, but Pierre, a spy for the Pope, lets the Pope escape and locks Landry and the others inside. Queen Joan has been thinking about how to respond since she returned to her domain. While she was worrying about the affairs of the country, the governor of Navarre came to invite her to attend a war meeting. Knowing that only the highest commanders are qualified to convene a war conference, the governor's move was a step beyond his rank, and Queen Joan was a bit angry. However, what infuriated her even more was that Navarre had surrendered, and the Queen of Catalonia was already seated on the throne. The governor wanted to take the Queen back to Paris, but the Queen of Catalonia refused. She stated that while others could leave, Queen Joan must stay, as they were relatives. Meanwhile, in the French palace, de Nogaret risked his life to approach King Philip. He informed the king that the Holy Grail was in France and that it had the power to overthrow the king's rule. There is an army of paladins in the lands of France, not under the authority of the king. These men are well equipped and trained, and these men are ruled only by the Pope. De Nogaret states that he has raised an army of Red Knights who are capable of fighting the Templars. However, King Philip saw no need to make enemies of the Templars, considering himself a close friend of Landry. De Nogaret countered, claiming that Landry was not the king's friend but rather the queen's intimate companion, even suggesting that the queen's unborn child was Landry's. Enraged, King Philip grabbed de Nogaret by the throat but ultimately restrained himself. He decided to imprison de Nogaret until the queen's return for further questioning. After calming down, King Philip sent a box of gold and silver to Nogaret's room, even though he was not completely sure about what Nogaret said, just in case. This box of gold and silver was the payment to the Red Knight. The Queen of Catalonia, seeking vengeance for Prince Louis's death, demanded that Queen Joan choose between her unborn child and her daughter Isabella in Paris. Faced with this cruel choice, Joan was forced to offer Isabella. However, Joan later appealed to their familial bond, reminding the Queen of Catalonia that the child she carried was also her blood relative. The Queen of Catalonia was moved as she felt the baby's movements and realized that her behavior was cruel and selfish. Just when she let down her guard, Joan took the opportunity to stab her to death. With the Queen of Catalonia dead, Joan took her place, becoming the new ruler of Catalonia and Navarre. Landry and the others are trapped inside the house, and with Pierre outside directing people to bang on the door, it's only a matter of time before the door is broken down. The defenders grabbed what few weapons they had and prepared to fight.
Here.
When the enemy rushed in, Landry's mother joined in the fight. The paladin blocked the door with a bench. Landry's mother also constantly reached the lives of her enemies. It's just that in this frontal combat scenario, the scimitar attack has little range. After Rashid takes out an enemy, he is stabbed by the enemy with his short sword, luckily not to the internal organs. Draper cauterized the wound with a hot iron, but it was only a temporary fix. Rashid has no time to rest, as outside the enemy pours a toxic powder through the fireplace. Landry decides to break out and Rashid joins in, leading the charge. Despite his severe injuries and the overwhelming number of enemies, Rashid fought valiantly but ultimately fell. Landry headed straight for Pierre, who proved to be a formidable opponent. Their sword fight turned into a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Just as neither seemed to gain the upper hand, an arrow struck Pierre in the thigh. Seizing the moment, Landry finished him off. Before Rashid died, he called Landry to his side and asked him to put a bracelet in his son's grave. He apologized to Landry and said that it was his plan to make Landry think someone was dead. Then Rashid died. Landry is puzzled by this statement that Rashid made when a masked man in black comes to him. He took off his veil and it turned out to be Tancred. It turned out that the person Rashid was talking about was Tancred. The relationship between the Paris branch of the Knights Templar and the Pope had completely broken down. Soon, Landry received his excommunication notice, followed by an arrest warrant personally signed by the Grand Master of the Templars, de Molay. Initially, Landry planned to meet with Grand Master de Molay to expose the Pope's misdeeds. However, the Pope acted first. Despite this, Landry stuck to his original plan, firmly believing that the Grand Master would side with him. As Landry stepped out, he saw a group of people at the door who had decided to stay at the Paris branch and no longer follow him. Landry respected their choice. Tancred then asked him if he would still go to Chartres to find the Grand Master if it were just the two of them. Landry firmly stated that he would. When they opened the door, they saw a crowd of Templars outside, all supporters of Landry. Making such a choice was extremely risky for the Templars.
By the grace of God! By the grace of God!
On the other hand, Joan, who killed the Queen of Catalonia, now inherited 2 countries and became the new queen. She felt that the days of hiding things should end, so she decided to stay in Navarre and rule the country. Joan hoped that Landry would join her. However, plans often go awry when put into action. Queen Joan couldn't bear to leave her daughter Isabella behind, so she decided to risk returning to Paris to take her away. Upon arriving at the palace, she ordered her maid to summon Isabella. When Isabella arrived, she expressed her unwillingness to leave France. Although Navarre is Queen Joan's territory, it has nothing to do with Isabella. As a princess, Isabella has no reason to leave, so the conversation between the two was not pleasant. Landry led his contingent of Templars to the Templar headquarters in Chartres. The Templars there were fully armed and lined up, awaiting their arrival. De Molay received Landry, and after a brief exchange of pleasantries, Landry recounted the Pope's crimes to the Grand Master. He revealed that the Pope had sent assassins to kill the Templar leader Godfrey, stolen the Holy Grail, and planned to conquer all of Europe. To Landry's surprise, the Grand Master refuted his claims, suggesting that the Pope's actions might benefit the Templars. De Molay believed that with the Pope dealing with Europe's troubles, the Templars could reclaim the Holy Land, achieving a mutually beneficial outcome. Landry hesitated, unsure if he truly wanted to return to Jerusalem. The Grand Master then asked Landry if he would withdraw his accusations against the Pope. Landry not only refused but also urged the Grand Master to rally all Templars to challenge the Pope and reclaim the Holy Grail. However, the Grand Master saw no reason to oppose the Pope, especially since the Pope had already arrived in Chartres. Landry now faced imminent judgment. Queen Joan wrote a letter and planned to have her maid deliver it to Landry at the Knight's sanctuary. She planned to leave France at dusk. Just then, King Philip entered the room, and in her haste, Joan hid the letter under a book. King Philip had come to invite her to dinner. He picked up a Navarrese coin from the desk, complimented it, and continued to look around. As his hand rested on the book, Joan quickly accepted the dinner invitation. However, she noticed something amiss. King Philip had always disliked Navarrese coins but now praised them. The maid reassured Joan, reminding her that the king would not have invited her to dinner if he knew she was carrying another man's child. Unbeknownst to them, Isabella overheard their conversation and was shocked by the revelation. Landry was imprisoned, awaiting trial. Tancred wanted to help him escape, but Landry refused. He believed that since the Pope was present, the Holy Grail must be there as well. He thought that since the Pope was here, the Holy Grail must be here too. Landry asked Tancred to take back the Holy Grail while the defense was empty during the trial. Faced with Landry's firm request, Tancred had no choice but to agree. At the trial, the Templars listed 5 charges against Landry, including assaulting a fellow Templar, conspiring with Saracens, making false accusations against the Pope, and violating his oath to the Templars, who were sworn to obey the Pope. When it was Landry's turn to defend himself, he did not deny the charges. He claimed that all his actions were in pursuit of the Holy Grail at the Pope's behest. He acknowledged that his guilt was evident from the shackles he wore. Landry was right, and the consequence of accusing the judge in this court was self-evident. His actions were considered an insult to the sanctity of the temple. He accused the Pope of being the true culprit, revealing that the Pope had killed Godfrey. The Pope admitted to the killing, shocking the court. He claimed that Godfrey was a traitor who had revealed the location of a secret tunnel to the enemy, leading to the fall of Acre and the loss of the Templars' last stronghold in the Holy Land. The Grand Commander asked Landry if it was true. Landry was speechless. He only said that Acre could not be defended under such circumstances. Facing the Pope's compelling argument, Landry appealed to the Templars, swearing that everything he did was to protect the Holy Grail. At that moment, the Pope called his witness, Gane. Gane tells Landry all in public about exchanging Tancred for information about the Holy Grail and about conceiving a child with a married woman. Landry regretted confiding in Gane, never expecting his betrayal. The Grand Master pronounced the Knight Commander Landry of Paris guilty of many of the 9 deadly sins. Landry was excommunicated and sentenced to death by burning, his soul condemned to eternal damnation. Meanwhile, a soldier noticed a Templar embracing a guard. As the guard approached, Tancred attacked. The Pope is preparing Landry for his punishment as Landry looks around at the people holding candles. The people around him drop the candles on the floor. The Pope was preparing Landry's punishment when he was informed of an urgent matter. He paused the ceremony and met with Landry's mother in a private room. The Pope knows she's here to plead for Landry, but with the Holy Grail in his hands at this point, there's no reason he can't burn Landry. However, Landry's mother was confident that the Pope would change his mind after hearing what she had to say. Tancred rolls up to the Pope's door and is confronted by 2 guards, whom he quickly disposes of. Suddenly, a female assassin hired by Nogaret appeared, and the 2 engaged in combat. The female assassin discovers that Tancred is connected to the Brotherhood of Light, and apparently this woman seems to have some connection to the Brotherhood of Light as well. Tancred is no match for the female assassin and is quickly knocked out by her opponent. The female assassin grabs the chalice and escapes through the window. The crowd didn't know what Landry's mother had said to the Pope, and the Pope gave up on executing Landry at the stake, even removing the penalty of excommunication. The Pope's decision bewildered everyone, including Landry. The Pope personally apologized to Landry, but their conversation was interrupted by a guard reporting the theft of the Holy Grail. Everyone is so busy searching for the Holy Grail that they completely forget that Landry is still locked up in the Great Hall. Taking this opportunity, Gawain came to the hall with a sledgehammer and he wanted Landry to feel his pain. He swung the sledgehammer at Landry's knees and then turned away, leaving Landry to wail in agony. After discovering Landry, the members of the knighthood took him to the chief physician for treatment. Fortunately, his injuries were not severe, and he only needed to have the bruises on his leg cleared.
This will hurt.
The next day, Landry, who was lying in bed, received a visitor, who was the Pope. The Pope informed Landry that he had rescinded the order against him and wished for Landry's leg to heal quickly. This was because Nogaret had regained King Philip's favor and was assembling a powerful army to confront the papacy. Before the king announced that he had obtained the Holy Grail, the Pope wanted Landry to lead the Paris branch of the Knights to retrieve it. Meanwhile, in the French royal palace, Joan returned to France after quelling the rebellion. King Philip approached Joan privately, offering to forgive her past transgressions if she reconciled with him. However, Queen Joan only wanted to be with Landry, which King Philip found humiliating. Upon learning that Landry and the knights were on their way back to Paris, King Philip ordered Nogaret to ambush and assassinate Landry outside the city. However, Joan overheard this plan and begged King Philip to spare Landry. Her plea only enraged King Philip further, intensifying his hatred for Landry. King Philip declared that he would show Landry no mercy. As he turned to leave, Joan picked up a candlestick from the table and knocked King Philip unconscious. She then took the Holy Grail and left. In the forest outside Paris, she found Landry and revealed King Philip's plan. At this moment, a horse rushed over from a distance, and the two riders on the horse were already dead. Apparently they were shot by the enemy on the way back to report the news. Realizing the enemy was close, Landry ordered his men to take Joan to safety. Before leaving, Joan secretly told Landry that she had the Holy Grail. Landry instructed her to hide it carefully and not tell anyone. The Templars had also formed a defensive line, ready for the impending battle.
Have no fear. They fight for money. We fight for the glory of God. And we win by the grace of God!
In the forest of Versailles, a group of soldiers clad in red cloaks emerged from the woods. They called themselves the Red Knights, mercenaries hired by King Philip of France. Their sole purpose was to annihilate the Knights Templar and eliminate Landry. In terms of numbers, the Red Knights outnumbered the Knights Templar several times over. The Red Knights were led by Gane, while the Templars were led by the limping Landry. The battle began, with Landry charging at the forefront. Despite being outnumbered, the Knights Templar did not retreat. Soon, the shields of the Templars clashed with those of the enemy. The Templars fought with great coordination, skillfully taking down Red Knights one after another, and the battle reached a stalemate. In the midst of the fight, Gane noticed Tancred and was puzzled, as he had not expected Tancred to be alive. Gane, now the commander of the Red Knights, held power and influence. The shield wall broke, and both sides engaged in close combat. Despite his limp, Landry fought fiercely, taking down 4 enemies in quick succession. However, some of the Templars began to tire, their weapons slipping from their hands, leaving them with only their shields. Facing the overwhelming number of Red Knights, they felt despair, as if the enemy was endless. As one knight was about to fall, Landry rushed to his aid and encouraged him.
They have the numbers, but we have God on our side. Now let's fight!
The Red Knight has a tall warrior on his side. His weapon is a hammer, which he swings with great power. Landry focused his gaze on Gane, who was just a few meters away, the man who had once betrayed him. Landry charged straight at Gane, with no soldier able to stop him. Landry swung his sword at Gane, who defended with his shield. Gane seemed content to defend, even taking a punch without retaliating. Landry's fury blinded him to Gawain's strategy of luring him into a trap. Surrounded, Landry found himself far from the center of the battlefield. The enemy's shields were unusually large, and Landry couldn't break through. He was forced to move with the shield wall and was led into the woods. In his rage, Landry was struck in the leg by a spearman, though he managed to take down a few more soldiers. He couldn't break through the shield wall. Exhausted and injured, Landry crouched on the ground, enduring the pain and frustration. At that moment, King Philip, draped in a blue cloak, appeared. He knew of Landry's affair with the Queen and was enraged that Queen Joan had knocked him out to steal the Holy Grail. King Philip decided to deal with Landry personally in the woods. Landry, who had been King Philip's swordsmanship teacher, was now seen as a traitor who had used his position to have an affair with the Queen. Landry's explanations fell on deaf ears, as his relationship with the Queen was undeniable. The two engaged in a sword fight, but Landry, injured and exhausted, was quickly overpowered. King Philip revealed that he knew Joan was nearby. Landry begged for the king to spare the Queen, but King Philip, feeling betrayed, had no intention of showing mercy. In a fit of rage, Landry pushed King Philip aside, only to be struck down by a soldier's shield. Meanwhile, Queen Joan's water had broken, and Draper was preparing to deliver her baby. Despite her condition, Joan was worried about Landry. Draper tried to reassure her, but a soldier informed her that Landry was surrounded in the forest. Before he could finish, the soldier was killed by an enemy. Disregarding her condition, Joan rushed towards the forest to save Landry. On the battlefield, Tancred faced Gawain, calling him a traitor, but he was no match for Gawain's skill. Gawain had always wanted to use the Holy Grail to heal his legs, but King Philip let the royal physician heal his legs. Now at his peak, Gawain easily overpowered Tancred. Landry's fight with King Philip turned into a brutal brawl. Landry managed to land a few punches, but King Philip quickly gained the upper hand. Landry collapsed, too weak to stand. As King Philip's fists rained down on him, Landry's mind drifted to his memories with Joan.
You're the only woman I've ever loved.
At this moment, Joan appeared. At this moment, she was not the queen, but just an ordinary woman who was worried about her lover. She begged King Philip to spare Landry, even offering her own life in exchange. But King Philip was unmoved, determined to make Joan watch Landry die. On the battlefield, Tancred was defeated, but the Grand Master arrived with reinforcements. Tancred broke free from Gawain, and the Red Knights were forced to retreat. Tancred and two other knights surrounded and killed the formidable Red Knight warrior. Under Joan's constant pleading, King Philip turned his attention to Joan. Joan said that she and Landry could leave France forever, and if King Philip really loved her, he should spare Landry. Enraged, King Philip agreed to spare Landry but demanded Joan's life in return. If he couldn't have her, neither could Landry.
No, Joan, no!
If that's what you want, I'll spare his life and take yours instead.
A soldier informed King Philip that the Templars' reinforcements had arrived and the Red Knights had been defeated. King Philip left the pain to Landry and left with his soldiers. Landry cradled the dying Joan, overwhelmed with grief. Her internal injuries were severe, and Draper could do nothing to save her. Landry begged Joan to stay awake and talk to him. Joan spoke of her dreams for the future, returning to Navarre and living happily with their family. Landry admitted his mistakes, realizing he had been too focused on finding the Holy Grail. Suddenly, he remembered that the Holy Grail could bring the dead back to life, and the Holy Grail was in Joan's possession. Remembering the legend of the Holy Grail's healing powers, Landry had Draper fetch some water and pour it into the Grail. They hoped for a miracle, and Joan claimed to feel better after drinking.
Do you see the blue? My darling.
Joan?
And the horses, they have a foal. Can you see the foal?
I can see.
Will you bring our child to meet with the foal? It's beautiful.
However, their hopes were dashed as Joan slipped into unconsciousness and eventually passed away. In a fit of rage, Landry smashed the Holy Grail. The object they had all sought was now shattered. Heartbroken, Landry imagined a happy family of 3 and put his hand on Joan's belly. Suddenly, he felt the fetus move. The Holy Grail failed to save Joan, but it saved her child. Draper looked at everything in front of him in disbelief, as if this was impossible. So, Draper heard that there was a way to save the baby in Syria, and asked Landry if he was willing to try it. Landry agreed without hesitation. In fact, this is the modern cesarean section. The baby was delivered safely, a girl. Landry held his daughter, a glimmer of joy amidst his sorrow. Tancred and the Grand Master presided over the funeral for Joan and the fallen Templars. Landry, holding his newborn daughter, stated his guilt at the funeral and then expressed his love for the Queen of France, the Queen of Navarre, and Joan. Until he had finished speaking, Tancred sang a hymn, and in the midst of the song, Joan was slowly buried. During the funeral, a Templar approached a carriage and opened a box containing the shattered Holy Grail. He pried open the base of the Grail with a small knife and retrieved a tiny scroll, which he then swallowed. As Landry prepared to leave, he noticed a red flower blooming in the winter cold, a flower common in Navarre. He envisioned the scene Joan had described, a cozy cottage in Navarre surrounded by red flowers and grazing horses, a happy family of 3.